Welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. We're still watching closely developments in the journey towards a deal between Iran and the United States. The U.S. president on Sunday said negotiations towards a deal are constructive, but that both sides must take their time and get it right. By Sunday evening, U.S. media was reporting that no deal would be signed on that day, as details of the agreement are still being negotiated. One of the main sticking points is what would happen to Iran's nuclear program. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been whispering in President Donald Trump's ear that any final agreement with Iran must remove the nuclear threat, and that his policy remains that Iran will not have nuclear weapons. The Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, however, says his country will not compromise on its honor during the negotiations and that Iran has no desire to acquire nuclear weapons. He has accused Israel of disturbing the region, noting that Tel Aviv is actively pursuing the Greater Israel Plan and is conspiring to keep war, unrest, and discord alive. What is certain, however, is that the blockade of Iran's ports will remain in full force and effect until an agreement is reached, certified, and signed. That's according to President Donald Trump, who says that while the U.S.'s relationship with Iran is becoming much more professional, Tehran must understand they cannot develop or procure a nuclear weapon or bomb. Back here in Nigeria, Canada's Secretary of State for International Development, Sandeep Sarai, was in the country last week. He held bilateral meetings with government officials, engaged with the private sector, development and innovation partners. Most of the meetings held in the Federal Capital Territory, but at the Canadian Deputy High Commission in Lagos, a reception was held in Mr. Sarai's honor. He announced more than £30 million in humanitarian assistance and development projects benefiting Nigeria and countries across West Africa. The initiatives will strengthen health systems, expand opportunities for women entrepreneurs and small businesses, advance climate resilience and clean growth, deepen cooperation on governance and digital resilience, and invest in Canadian expertise and direct technical assistance to the Nigerian government to strengthen access to justice. Well, that reception was attended by the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Jumoke Oduwole, and the Lagos State Commissioner for Commerce, Cooperatives, Trade and Investment, Bolashade Ambrose Medebem.
Countries are looking for partners they can rely on, partners that show up and follow through. That kind of partnership is what Canada wants and sees in Nigeria. Canada also understands that sustainable economic growth depends on strong foundations. That means access to financing, a skilled and healthy workforce, transparent institutions, climate resilience, and more opportunities for women and youth to achieve their full potential. And Canada's long-standing international assistance partnership with Nigeria has helped support the continuation and conditions for sustainable and inclusive growth, supporting small businesses, strengthening local governance and health systems, expanding opportunities for women and youth, building climate resilience, and improving skills training. These are the kind of partnerships that Canada is here to help build. And in this new era of development, the challenges require all of us: development finance institutions, multilaterals, and the private sector, many of whom are here tonight, working together to move capital where it's most needed.
Nigeria continues to partner with Canada as one of our strategic investors and partners in trade and investment and industry. Just to say that we're committed to making sure that we have investment promotion and protection for all Canadian investors and also for Nigerian investors in Canada. So we just had a bilateral talk on our commitment, mutual commitment to make that happen. Also to say that when you put a woman in charge of such a portfolio, of course, development is at the heart of trade, investment, and industry. It's actually my nexus of expertise in academia, trade, and development. I've done quite a bit of research and work on that. But in this current portfolio, at least for sure, under the African Continental Free Trade Area, Nigeria has ratified the Protocol on Women and Youth, and we continue to emphasize that aspect. With trade across the African continent, we lead with several programs. We've partnered with UNDP, and I see UNDP and several other partners here in the room. We've partnered with, for investment, we've signed an MOU with the Ministry of Women Affairs, and we have Kuramo Capital in the room. We have a program supporting women investors access to capital. And we just, our latest is women in manufacturing, like Secure ID, like Folake Koka, working in partnership with Kwara State. Manufacturing for garments, that's another announcement that we had very recently last week. Just to assure you, Minister, that development is at the heart of the Tinubu administration.
Mr. Governor was very clear about our commitment to terms of ensuring that we continue to work with you in Canada. He specifically outlined some of the key sectors. And I don't want to reiterate that here, but I do want to say that one of the biggest things in Lagos under the Themes Plus agenda, our homing on M, which is about making Lagos State a 21st century economy. And clearly that is in alignment with the Renewed Hope agenda. And a number of our projects as well, I'm delighted to say, is the Lagos State Export Readiness Program, where we trained over 253 businesses on the cusp of being able to export, proudly made in Lagos. And so Canada will certainly be one of our regions that we'll be looking forward to visiting. We also alluded to FinTech, which was on some of the other IT projects that you discussed with Mr. Governor. It would be amiss of me to stand here and not mention the forthcoming Invest in Lagos 3.0 event, which is taking place on the 8th and 9th of June in partnership with the Commonwealth. And can I take the liberty of saying Canada as well? And the theme is very simple. It's about gateway business opportunities to Africa where innovation meets capital. And it's going to be an incredibly global event. And I'm delighted to say our Honourable Minister, Dr. Oduole, is going to be headlining that event with us. Yes, please, let's applaud. And I really look forward to, I do really look forward to you all joining us there.
Speaking of Canada, a while back I held a chat with the Deputy High Commissioner, Carlos Rojas-Arbulu, who's been here at least a year. You can tell from his name he does have Latino heritage. But we learn how Canada became home for him, how he's navigating the world of diplomacy and policies unique to Canada. So your name doesn't give you off as a Canadian or anyone from North America. Sounds to me like you do have Spanish roots.
I do, from South America. My heritage is from Peru. And as I was saying just earlier, it's very much the Canadian story, right? With many families finding themselves in Canada and making a life in Canada. And that's the case for my family as well. Coming to Quebec, Montreal, and hence why I'm a Francophone, coming to Canada in the late 80s. And then from then on, like many other Canadian families, making life there and schooling and of course, professional development following that. And I've been now with the Government of Canada for 25 years. And I'd say probably the last 20 working overseas. And now I'm working in Nigeria.
But that's also the unique thing about Canada. You have still maintained your heritage while still being Canadian.
Absolutely.
Do you sometimes feel conflicted, sometimes, when you see some Canadian policies and how they, reflect on your country of origin, I would say, or your parents' country of origin? Do you feel a bit conflicted when things like that come up?
Well, I would say that, the dual identity is, it's a wonderful thing. And it's a very Canadian thing, right? Because you feel in your heart and your soul and you're being Canadian, very Canadian, but at the same time, you honor your heritage and you always remember the place you came from. And that is, I think, that what is happening now with myself and probably with our children as well, where I'm married to a Francophone Canadian from Quebec. And at home, we speak French and English, but also we try to maintain the Spanish language as well alive, given that is part of their heritage as well. So that dual identity, I think it's a powerful thing. I would say even is my superpower. That dual identity, where I am so proud to represent our country abroad. I've been doing that for over 20 years now. This is my 6th diplomatic assignment. So I wear the maple leaf and the flag with pride, and at the same time, I always remember where I come from.
Yeah, and we're celebrating La Francophonie,
Yes.
French speakers of the French language across the world. Um, well, so you speak Spanish, you also speak English, and then you also speak French.
Right.
Do you also feel a bit, maybe you think that some of the other ethnicities in Canada might feel a bit, you know, um, left out, when days like this come up and only the French language is being celebrated? I really haven't heard of, Spanish language being celebrated or the English language being celebrated, but, France does have, or French rather, has a uniqueness to it, which is why it is being celebrated on its own.
Well, it's interesting because clearly Canada's identity is also a French identity, right? Not only because of the language, but because of the culture and because of our heritage. And as a result, we have been part of this institution called La Francophonie for many, many years. And to this day, we contribute, we participate, we celebrate, given that it is, as I said, part of our identity. I think when it comes to the celebration of many other languages and many other cultures and communities, that is something that actually happens quite often in our country. Whereas in any of our, I dare say, our larger cities, or perhaps our more populous cities, whether it is Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, or Halifax, you do have the representation of many of that duality of being a Canadian, but also being a Canadian that has a heritage from another continent, from Asia, from Europe, from other part, Latin America and beyond. And as a result, there are opportunities to celebrate that as well. It's a very powerful thing when you actually look at how our society is looked at and is portrayed. And one of the examples that we often talk about is what our cabinet looks like. Right. So when you look at our prime minister and then you look at our cabinet, not only you have the diversity in terms of men and women, we've aimed, of course, to be at the 50% representation of both sides, but also you have Canadians of Indian heritage, Canadians of Hispanic heritage, Canadians of Greek heritage, and they're all Canadians, and they are the voice of their constituents and they're the voice of their communities, and as a result, it's a way for us to celebrate being a Canadian in its multiple facets and in its multiple identities, as I said.
What does a day like La Francophonie look like in Canada?
I would say Canada, just to put things a little bit into perspective, 80% of Francophones in Canada are based out of Quebec. The other 20% are based in different parts and different pockets across the country. And as a result, you have a very strong, French-Canadian identity coming out of Quebec. And as I was saying earlier, myself being from Montreal, Quebec, is something that you carry across the world. And I think the Francophonie Day or month is an important celebration, but we also have, the policies and the programs and the, and the plans to ensure that the language and the culture is protected, to ensure that we are advancing the Francophone side of Canada to the world. And as a result, many French Canadians are able to live in that in a society that it is fully bilingual, and in a society that also allows them to prosper with that heritage of being a French Canadian. So, in some ways, it is a very normal situation for Francophones in Canada to feel identified as Canadians, but there's also a strong identity to the place they come from, and in this case, from Quebec.
So immigration is really a big
Right.
topic in Canada.
Yes.
And I hear that your government is trying to keep some people out. Well, trying to regulate the number of immigrants you have in the country, because you have more people than you have social services. And, with that, people begin to complain. We have too many immigrants in the country, and that seems to be where you are right now. So what is the most important policy right now for immigration as regards emigrating to Canada or living in the country? What exactly is the most important policy for people to know?
As it relates to the Francophonie, because this is a conversation we're having. Now we're moving into another area that is.
We can't help it.
Yes.
We can't help it.
Well, look, what I would say is, the same message that we've been saying about that openness that Canada has had for the longest time, right? Our policies have always been very open with regards to immigration. My own family, as I said earlier, coming to Canada, and the story of many Canadians. Clearly, Canada is a place where we also want to attract talent, where we also want to attract individuals that are able to support the growth of our economy, in the same way as many countries out there are looking for those I'm going to say economic immigrants that are able to respond to the needs of our society. And if we speak about, for instance, Nigeria, Nigeria and Nigerians are a very important part of our composition of our society, with 120,000 members of the diaspora. But you also have to add to that, 20 to 25,000, and depending on the year, a little bit more of Nigerian students coming to Canada. And that has been so interesting because Nigeria, depending on the year, it's actually the third or the fourth source for international students to Canada. So it speaks to the fact that with Nigeria, there is a very important component of both diaspora and students that at some point are also looking for that pathway to the residency and then eventually citizenship.
So how do you react to some people? I mean, because I've heard in the last few months, there's been a growing number of returnees, from Canada, people going back to their countries of origin because they either cannot get jobs or they can't get, housing, or they complain that, the standard of living is just not, convenient anymore for them. How do you react to that?
Well, it's difficult to say. I mean, I haven't really, looked or thought carefully about what does that mean for those individuals that are coming back to their countries of origin. Perhaps, the experts would have a better analysis of the situation. But what I would say is that I think that's also part of the journey, right? For some individuals that have come to Canada with the intention to develop professionally in a particular field, for instance, right? Let's say somebody's immigrating to Canada because there's an opportunity to develop in the oil and gas sector,
Right.
or in the mining sector, or in the agricultural sector, or even in the technology sector. We know that perhaps there is many more employment opportunities in those sectors, given that there's tremendous growth, and given that those are sectors that are also attracting investment, attracting talent, and therefore it's opening the door to many more people. But in certain other occasions, perhaps the need for work in areas of, I'm making it up, right? In the areas of hospitality, or in the areas of, the legal practice, may be less so, because we have so many individuals already. The pool of talent, it's already substantial, and as a result, perhaps there's less opportunity there. Now, is that any different from the US or the UK or France? Probably not. But my point being that it really depends on how the context of each individual journey has taken place. But I believe, and I continue to believe, that Canada has a strong appeal for Nigerians, given the numbers and the stats and the evidence that I was telling you about, but also an appeal because there is a particular bond between our countries, and there's also much more opportunity for us to develop, particularly in the business and the investment side.
Deputy High Commissioner Rojas-Arbulu, thank you so much for speaking with me.
Thank you. Such a pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak about Canada and Nigeria, speak about Francophonie, and if there's one message that I would like to convey, is that Canada can be a partner of choice. As I was saying earlier, there's such an important bond between our countries. There's so much more that we can do in the economic space, including in the space of the Francophonie. And I'm hoping that 2026 is going to be a big year. We're going to be having some Canadian companies visiting. We're going to be having some events, and clearly a series of things happening as well in Canada that connect the Nigeria-Canada business agenda. So thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Here's more of those conversations holding in diplomatic circles.
What's your third question? U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has dismissed concerns over alleged racist comments against Indians in the United States, saying that every country has stupid people. He was making the remark at a press conference in New Delhi on Saturday. He also defended U.S. President Donald Trump's stricter policy and immigration, noting that the United States has faced a migratory crisis and must act in its national interest.
We've had a migratory crisis in the United States. This is not because of India, but broadly, we had over 20 million people illegally enter the United States over the last few years, and we've had to address that challenge. In addition to that challenge, and I think this is true for India, this is true for every country in the world, okay? Everything that you do as a country needs to be in your national interest, and that includes your immigration policy. The United States, I believe, is the most welcoming country in the world on immigration. Every single year, 1 million people, roughly, become permanent residents of the United States and contribute greatly. My parents entered the United States as permanent residents in 1956 from Cuba. And so it's a process that's enriched us. But it has to be a process that's adjusted in every era to the realities of the modern times in which you live. And it's long overdue.
We spent some time today discussing energy issues.
Meanwhile, the Indian Foreign External Minister says the Indo-Pacific region will become a big energy lifeline, as U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio signaled the finalization of the U.S.-India Trade Pact. This comes after India committed to purchasing $50 billion worth of U.S. products over the next 5 years, strengthening ties in defense, technology and trade, while New Delhi also continues to maintain relations with countries like Iran and Russia.
We were just talking about energy. It'll even become a big energy lifeline. I mean, if you're going to see, for example, a much bigger India-US energy trade, or India's energy and general trade with the US, with other countries in the Americas, I can see, much more growth, much more trade, much more maritime activity out there. So to me, the work on Quad goes on. And I think 2 days from now, you will see us on the podium talking about the Quad. And I can assure you, we will have a good, strong story to tell.
Good news is that through this rebalancing, we are ultimately seek and believe we will arrive at trade arrangements around the world that are good for the United States, but also good for our trade partners. And one of those we hope will be India. In fact, we are on the verge of making that happen. We are hopeful that our trade representative can visit here very soon. We had an Indian delegation in the United States, I believe last week or the week before. We've made tremendous progress. And I think we're going to wind up with a trade agreement between the United States and India that's going to be enduring and is going to be beneficial to both sides and sustainable in a way that addresses this national interest that we had.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia's attack against the Kiev region was really inadequate, urging Western allies for support. He was making the appeal via video address on Sunday. According to him, the blow was heavy. 90 missiles of various types, many of them ballistic, 36, 600 drones. Unfortunately, not all ballistic missiles could be shot down. Most of the hits were in Kiev, he stated, adding, Putin can barely even say the word hurrah properly, mumbling. Yet, he is still defeating residential buildings with his missiles. It is important that this does not remain without consequences for Russia. Today, everyone in the world who does not stay silent, who helps Ukraine, is a defender of life. It is very important to continue working to ensure air defense for Ukraine, Zelensky continued. Decisions are needed for the United States of America, from Europe and from others, so that this old Oreshnik in Moscow utters the word peace. 2 people lost their lives and 56 sustained wounds in Kiev due to the strike, according to the mayor, Vitaly Klitschko.
Thanks for watching Diplomatic Channel. I'll see you next time. I'm Amarachi Ubani.